to my right. There are other officers in the chamber tonight and they'll be introduced as we move to various items. The Urban Planning Delegate Committee is live streamed on Council's YouTube to enable public viewing. The meeting is also recorded and will be made available also on Council's YouTube as soon as practicable after the meeting. The primary purpose of the Urban Planning Delegated Committee is to deal with issues under the Planning and Environment Act and the Building Act. This committee has delegated authority to actually make decisions on behalf of Council. For those, I'll skip that one I'm presenting the evening because there isn't anyone. Moving right along. And also, I'll skip all the bits to do with people speaking tonight. Wonderful. And also, I will mention the strict limit on 3 minutes because it applies to councillors also. And also about inappropriate behaviour. I'm sure Montserrat Pesamenti won't be inappropriately behaving tonight. Thank you very much. Councillors, as you know, as you say anything, it'll be great if you speak directly into the microphone so we can all hear it. So, moving right ahead, apologies. Ms. Ritchie, are there any apologies this evening?
Thank you, and through you, Chair, there are no apologies for tonight's meeting.
I will move to adoption and confirmation of the minutes of the Urban Planning Delegated Committee meeting held 24 March 25. I have been informed by officers that there is an error in these minutes as circulated to the UPCDC meeting held on the 24th of March. The seconder for item 3.1, Victorian Government Planning Reforms Update, March 2025, should have read Councillor Hollingsworth. This will be rectified in the minutes as endorsed tonight. Councillors, can I please have a motion to adopt and confirm the minutes with the above change? Councillor Hollingsworth.
I would like to move a motion to accept the amended minutes. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Do I have a seconder to that? Councillor Nolan.
Happy to second.
Terrific. Is anyone opposed? No one opposed. I will now put the motion. All in favour? Terrific, that's carried. Declaration of conflicts of interest of any councillor or council officer. Councillors or council officers, are there any conflicts of interest you wish to foreshadow for meetings in the agenda tonight? There are none, thank you. Moving right straight away into the body of the meeting. Item 4.1 tonight is planning scheme anomalies, council-owned land, outcome of preliminary review and consultation. Tonight, the officer's report will be presented by Rachel Bryan, Strategic Planner. Thank you.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. Good evening, councillors, officers and attendees. Planning schemes are regularly reviewed to ensure they are up to date and correct. Since a previous review, a further 4 mapping anomalies relating to council-owned properties have been identified. These are set out in the data sheets at attachment 1 and include minor zoning inconsistencies and corrections. The zoning changes will more accurately reflect ownership and existing use as either a public park or public recreation area. Officers have sought internal feedback from relevant council departments throughout 2024. No objections were received to the proposed zoning changes. Given these changes are correctional in nature and are not considered to have any material impact on other parties based on review and referral, it is recommended to seek an exemption from normal notice requirements from the Minister when seeking authorisation of an amendment. This report seeks a resolution to commence a planning scheme amendment to correct mapping anomalies within the Boroondara planning scheme for council-owned properties. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. As there are no members of the public wishing to speak tonight, we'll move straight on to councillors' questions. Councillors, are there any questions? There are none. Terrific. Well, I'm now in search of a motion. Councillor Sinfield.
Happy to move the officer's recommendation. Thanks, Chair.
Here, do I have a seconder to that motion? Councillor Ballieu.
So seconded, Chair.
Terrific. Is there anyone opposed? No opposition. I'll move straight back to Councillor Sinfield. Do you wish to speak to that motion?
No, thank you, Chair. I think it speaks for itself.
Fantastic. Since there's no opposition, I will move directly to putting this motion. All of those in favour? It is carried unopposed. Thank you very much. Thank you indeed. We'll now move to item 4.2, Victorian Government Planning for Waterways Consultation, endorsement of a submission. Tonight, the officer's presentation will be presented by Nick Brennan, Senior Strategic Planner.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. The purpose of this report is to gain the UPDC's endorsement of the officer's submission to the Victorian Government's Planning for Waterways consultation. Prior to the previous state election, the government made a commitment to introduce planning controls over 14 key rivers and waterways in Melbourne to create wildlife corridors, protect waterways and to restore the natural environment. 2 of those nominated waterways are within the city of Boroondara, Gardeners Creek and Coonung Creek. To fulfil this election commitment, DTP has engaged with council and other stakeholders over the last 12 months to prepare planning controls for these waterways. These draft controls were released for public consultation in February, with submissions due on the 23rd of March 2025. Officers have reviewed the draft planning controls and prepared a submission. However, due to the limited time to prepare and lodge that submission, officers were not able to present the submission to the UPDC before the conclusion of the consultation period. The submission supports the proposed controls and does raise a number of concerns, including that the waterway-specific text relating to landscape values has not been included, and it's unclear whether we'll get a chance to comment on that before it is incorporated into the planning scheme. The planning permit requirement section is poorly worded and can be phrased in a more easily understood manner, in our opinion. There is an exemption for vegetation removal on sites associated with a dwelling of less than 2 hectares in area. That would basically rule out all the residential land in Boroondara that's affected, so that's something that we don't support. And there's also no guidance included on materials and finishes, despite that being included as an assessment requirement, so we're after some clarification on that. It's expected that the Minister for Planning will introduce these proposed controls through a ministerial amendment by June 2025. It's not expected there will be any further public consultation prior to the controls being incorporated into the planning scheme. Officers are recommending that UPDC resolve to endorse the officer's submission and to authorise the Manager of City Futures to write to the DTP to inform them of the UPDC's endorsement. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Again, we have no members of the public presenting tonight, so I can move straight to councillors' questions. Councillors, there are questions. Councillor Nolan.
Thank you for the report. I'm more than intrigued. The point 3, an exemption for vegetation removal on sites less than 2 hectares in area. I'm struggling to see why we would move to accept the Victorian Government's planning draft with that in it, and I'm just, I guess, asking the question: Can we, if we vote to accept your recommendation, does that mean that we are voting to accept that exemption? And why wouldn't we just say no? We don't want to support the VicGov's waterways draft.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So the decision tonight is not to approve or refuse the proposal from the state government. It's to support the officer's submission that has been sent in. And in that submission, we have said that we don't support that inclusion in the overlay. From a general standpoint, officers do support putting planning controls over the waterways. It will provide greater protection for those areas both from residential development and from other works taking place on the public land along the waterways. That's in line with a lot of council planning and council strategies that relate to those areas. So from a generalised standpoint, putting those controls in place is an improvement over what is there at the moment. However, this particular clause is not something that we support, and we have said that in our submission that we don't support that being included.
So I think I understand what you've just said. I still have discomfort. If we were to say, so this is City of Boroondara was to say we don't support this, would that then gain higher attention within the Victorian government just to make sure that is resolved? Because I appreciate, is there other councils voting on this?
Thanks, Chair. If I perhaps just add to the commentary here, outright opposing the introduction of the control would not gain any further traction in regard to this issue around vegetation controls. Our submission is that controls over the waterways is an important thing, and there should be stronger controls in regard to the vegetation removal issue. So that's actually what our submission is. That is a much more constructive way of putting forward a submission in regard to this particular control. That is the specific aspect around vegetation that is of concern and should be strengthened.
Thank you.
Councillor Buki.
Thank you. I just had some questions around the correspondence that has been tabled to be sent back. And I just had some questions around the tone that was used in that letter. And it might be that it's very standard and that's practice, but I just wondered, say, for instance, in the second page, para 1, we've said the permit requirements are poorly worded and result in confusion. And I just wondered whether there was an opportunity for us to, to explain that that is poorly worded, but we might not point that out in such direct language. Would it be helpful to do that or not, or would it not be worthwhile to rephrase some of the sentences that are in that letter?
Through you, Mr. Chair. It's certainly feedback that we can take on board. It's worth noting that the letter has also been accompanied by a track changes version of the planning legislation itself. So where we say it is poorly worded in the letter, in that accompanying document, we also outline you should not use this term, you should use this term instead. This is how it is written in other legislation, in other overlays, where in our practice, we find this to be operating in a better manner. In terms of the letter, this has already been sent back to the state government, but we can certainly take on board that perhaps we could use different language in those sort of letters in the future.
Thank you, thank you. I think just with a background as a writer, I would like us to use language that, is certainly puts a point across, but maybe is a little bit more considered in tone. It would be, great if you could consider that in future. Thank you.
Thank you. There doesn't appear to be any further questions. I'm therefore in search of a motion. Councillor Osborne-Smith.
Yes, happy to endorse the Planning Officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Buki.
Happy to second, thank you.
Is anyone opposed? There's no one opposed. Councillor Osborne-Smith, do you wish to speak to your motion?
No, thank you. I think the Officer's recommendation speaks for itself.
Fantastic. We'll then move directly on to putting the motion. All of those in favour? Councillor, yep. Thank you. It appears to be unopposed. The motion is carried. Thanks very much. We shall now move on to the last item for the night, item 4.3, former Vic Road site, Q, submission to Victorian Government, consultation on future redevelopment. Tonight, Charles Windier will present, Manager City Futures will be presenting the officer's report to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and through you. This report is to seek UPDC's endorsement of the submission on the future redevelopment of the former Vic Road site in Kew, that's known as 60 Denmark Street. The former Vic Road site was declared surplus by the Victorian Government in 2024, following Vic Roads relocating from the Kew Junction Activity Centre. In October 2024, the Minister for Planning rezoned the land for development, and Council prepared an urban design framework for the site, which identified key opportunities to be realised as part of any future development. Development Victoria is now responsible for the delivery of the project and is currently exploring redevelopment options. Development Victoria is contemplating a predominantly residential development with approximately 500 dwellings and some commercial uses at ground floor. They are considering adaptive reuse of the southern building and potential for more than one developer to be involved in developing the site. Development Victoria are currently undertaking a high-level community consultation to inform the preparation of a community aspirations report, which will in turn inform the future offer to the market. They've also indicated that Council's urban design framework will be used to inform the preparation and assessment of developer proposals. The key messages in Council's submission are that there should be greater recognition of the strategic value of the site and its ability to contribute to the employment and amenity functions of the activity centre in addition to housing. That permeability into and through the site, and in particular provision of a shared path extending along the southern tail to secure this critical piece of a connection between the Glenferrie Activity Centre and the future Box Hill and Hawthorn Trail. Calling on government to demonstrate its commitment to address the housing crisis by delivering more than the current commitment of 10% affordable housing for medium income households and for the inclusion of social and public housing. The need for integrated development outcomes to ensure the quality of the public realm, public open space and linkages through the site, which are at risk of being diminished if there are multiple developers. Our support for a sustainable development response and encouraging Development Victoria to show leadership and deliver a best practice precedent. And finally, the need for more clarity and certainty about the engagement and consultation process moving forward and how Council and the local community will be involved through the planning and development process. And we have called for an establishment of a reference group. So the officer's recommendation is that this submission attached is to the Victorian Government. The officer's recommendation is that UPDC endorse the submission at attachment 1 to the Victorian Government on the future redevelopment of the former Vic Road site, and that this submission is lodged with Development Victoria by the feedback deadline of 11 April 2025.
Councillors, again, I note there is no submissions from the gallery, so we can move straight into questions from councillors. Councillor Osborne-Smith.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. Great report. I enjoyed reading it and look forward to that advocacy for a highly valuable site for many reasons. I'd just like to comment on refer to page 25, which notes under 4 or 5 bullet points the importance of advocating for the provision of a shared path through the site. I just want to understand, by that, are we referring to a path that could sit alongside a residential development, or are we trying to advocate for a exclusive use of the tail as we know it for a shared trail? And if I may add, it would be my request to see that bullet point perhaps more robustly stated, to at least seek an exclusive use of the tail for a shared path, rather than in conjunction with perhaps some other residential development. That makes sense.
Through you, Chair. Thank you for your question. We have not been specific about whether the tail should be exclusively for a shared path or a shared path plus development, though it is relatively constrained, and obviously shared paths, when we talk about a shared path, we're talking about a pedestrian and a cycling route, have certain dimensional requirements, as well as we wouldn't want to see that be something that felt like a narrow, constrained and uncomfortable space. That said, having development facing onto it with what is commonly termed eyes on the street can be very beneficial from a safety perspective. We can certainly look to revise the wording of that and be more specific about it, or we could also just seek to engage Development Victoria further in that design if they're amenable to committing to the shared path.
It may be that other councillors have a different view, but I would have thought as a starting point, an exclusive use of that tail for a shared path with appropriate biodiversity, landscaping on the side, lighting ultimately, would be our more preferred starting point.
Mr Walker.
Thanks. If I could just maybe add that the original council position and position on the zoning of this site advocated for the entire tail to be zoned public open space, which would then enable the incorporation of a shared path. So the council has certainly taken a position to ask for the entire area of the tail to be set aside for open space and shared path purposes. And as indicated in the previous response, the preferred design outcome would be unlikely to include residential within that space, just simply because of the dimensions and the form and the ability to achieve an appropriate outcome within that area.
That makes sense. It's just not clear from that bullet point in my reading of it that that's our singular preferred position.
Councillor Hollingsworth.
Thank you, Chair. Just reading a media announcement that's been released today. Sorry, Mr Walker or Mr Winder, are you able to advise if the new Great Design Fast Track provisions would apply to any development on this site with regard to the Victorian government's announcement stating that all new dwellings that are above a certain height of a larger scale must achieve at least the 8-star NATHERS rating or a minimum 7.5-star rating, but also to demonstrate a little bit of what Councillor Osborne-Smith was saying, that they need to consider garden setbacks, bicycle access provisions. Are you able to confirm if any new developments on this site would come under that fast track design criteria?
Thanks. Happy to answer that and explain a little bit about the announcement today by the state government in regard to Great Design Fast Track proposals. It is a new and alternative planning application assessment pathway that is available to any applicant where there is a substantial residential outcome being sought. And it would apply and can apply to development applications where there is more than 8 dwellings and it is at a scale between 2 and 8 stories. And that would be an alternative pathway via the state government and would involve the Victorian government architect in that process. That really is a fast-track application process for developers on private sites. It would be unlikely that this would be a pathway that an applicant on this particular site would pursue. The work being done by Development Victoria will progress proposals or opportunities for developers on this site, really through an alternative pathway that is already available via the Minister for Planning through the way that the planning framework has been set up. So it would be unlikely that the alternative pathway would be pursued.
Thank you. So in theory, there would be exemptions on particular development projects. Am I understanding that correctly? If it was a state-funded or state-supported project?
Well, the alternative pathway is not a requirement on any developer. So if a developer chooses not to apply under this alternative pathway, the requirements around meeting particular ESD outcomes or other requirements does not apply. So it's an alternative pathway for high quality design outcomes that a developer may choose if they feel they meet those high design outcome requirements and ESD requirements. It is not an obligation. So the standard application pathway can still be pursued as an alternative, which not need to meet those tests.
Thank you.
Councillor Nolan.
Thank you to the officers for preparing this report. Found it very logical and easy to read, so thank you. I find the map 1 on page 29, which is not in the actual submission, but I find that map extremely compelling to show in the context of activity, the Kew Activity Centre, the Glenferrie Activity Centre, the Vic Road site, the future Box Hill to Hawthorn Trail. I find that, and it's a schematic rather than a Google, which is, I think it's really good to have that schematic. I find that really compelling and really to capture the imagination of potentially some bureaucrats in the VicGov, and I'm just wondering if we could include it, or what are your thoughts and why it wasn't included?
Through you, Chair. Thank you for that. Yes, we can include that in the submission, and it would be a appropriate and very striking graphic to accompany that particular point. And it not only demonstrates the north-south link, but an indication of the east-west link. A similar version of this diagram, although not quite as clearly showing the Glenferrie Activity Centre, is included in the urban design framework, which Development Victoria has and will be making available to developers.
Thank you.
That seems to have exhausted questions from the floor. I have some of my own, if I think this is the appropriate time. Thank you also for the report. Oh, my apologies. Councillor Friend Pereira.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to commend the officers for an excellent report. On page 2 of the submission, need for greater proportion of affordable and social housing, I note that the only working definition that we have in Victoria for affordable is Section 3AB of the Planning and Environment Act 1987, which defines affordable housing as housing that is appropriate for the housing needs of the very low and moderate income households. That's a very loose and poorly defined. There's no metrics on that. Is it worth considering that we might also add a line in to draw attention to that going forward for these kind of developments, not only do we want a certain proportion of the development to be affordable, but trying to push the state government to be a bit more definite in what they mean when they say affordable. Otherwise, we end up with them determining what is or isn't affordable, and a circular logic as to what is or isn't a moderate income, what is or isn't a very low income. So maybe we could add a sentence to that effect if possible.
Through yourself, Chair, just in terms of the Planning and Environment Act definition, it does actually go to the next level of what that means in dollars. And that is reviewed on an annual basis. So that does increase on an annual basis, and that's why it's not specified in the Act what that rate is, because it links to the separate reference of that increase. So that is actually an all-encompassing definition when it does reference the Planning and Environment Act. It's just, in our view, an inadequate reference point for genuine affordability issues, and perhaps that's a whole broader question around how these definitions are arrived at around affordable housing.
Thank you.
Councillor Osborne-Smith.
Just a follow-up question, if I may, through you, Chair. The Development Victoria's consultation process starts shortly, from what I understand from the report, and they are calling for expressions of interest on the development of the site. Do we have any confidence or comfort that that process, when it goes to 4,000 households in the area, that it will cover the potential for a shared trail along the tail? Or are we sort of in the hands of Development Victoria to draft that communication piece as they see fit?
Through you, Chair. So the consultation that Development Victoria is undertaking has already commenced, and it actually closes in 4 days' time. They have not been specific about that tail and what they're seeking for it. They have asked the community to come forward with what they think is important about Kew and ideas. So it's very much a broad community aspirations report that they are seeking to develop from this consultation. We have and continue to advocate for a community reference group to be developed to inform the planning of this site as it moves forward, so that there could be an ongoing advocacy and involvement in the process.
Well, perhaps that's a question offline, but I'd be keen to see Council take a position on informing the community about the opportunities of a shared trail on the tail. I'm a little concerned that that may miss the mark for many of those people in the community that will be asked to consider that site.
Thank you. Councillor Osborne-Smith, is that? Yep. I can now ask my questions. Thanks very much. Just picking up from Councillor Osborne-Smith's question, because even though we've written to the department before, because we're in a community consultation process, is it important that we also submit to that?
Thank you, Chair. This submission is direct to Development Victoria because of the nature of their community consultation, which is really an Engage Victoria exercise where people can highlight particular things on a map of Kew. So it's an online engagement, and there's some form of sort of survey attached to it. So this submission doesn't take the format that they are engaging with the community. It is so that we could put in a more fulsome submission and address our key issues.
We're doing that. Thank you very much. My next question is, thank you very much. You very clearly defined how the shared trail would go down and join into the Glenferrie Activity Centre and the trail, potential commuter trail through to the city. Another important thing I think for these developments is they have green open space, and I'm not seeing a lot of green open space potentially being provided around these buildings. And the potential for this trail is also to link it to Ellie Bray, which is a lovely long park, and right down to Grace Park. I wonder if it's worth just mentioning those, because those have been important in the arguments we've put forward to government to date.
Thank you. We can certainly embellish that aspect of the submission and highlight that this trail isn't just a trail on its own, that it's actually part of a network of green spaces and potential biodiversity corridors. The urban design framework that Council prepared and that Development Victoria has does talk about green space in the centre of the site and the importance of consolidating that to be a useful size rather than it being fragmented, and the importance of permeability into and through the site.
And my final question would be, and I guess I don't know if you're in a position to do this or not, but given discussions within this chamber, do we believe that we might be in a position to recommend that more than 10% affordable be provided for on this site, and that affordability is in fact more affordable than that defined in the current legislation?
Thank you, Chair. The submission that we have drafted at the moment does very clearly state that we believe that the 10% affordable housing, which Development Victoria has noted is for medium income households, so the top of that range of affordable housing in the Planning Environment Act, is significantly short of our expectations, but we haven't put forward any particular percentage or any particular range that we think would be appropriate. We've also highlighted in there the real opportunity for social and public housing, and the fact that the Victorian government has that role, and it also has the lowest provision of that of any state in Australia, I believe.
Thank you. We do have a further question from Councillor Nolan.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. Following on from Councillor Osborne-Smith's question about the community reference group, I'm intrigued, curious as to what we would expect from the Victorian government. Are we sort of, and pardon my ignorance on what would normally happen on a project of this significance and this import to Burundara, but what does Burundara expect to see from Victorian government? Who initiates it, and at what point does Burundara start that process themselves and then say, you know, we're ready to meet? So I'm just sort of teasing out how this generally goes as a first-time councillor, and then how it generally goes and what we can do to really make sure that we as a community are heard.
Thanks, Chair. I think it's fair to say that the historic approach is very different to the current approach. The historic approach of the government for large redevelopment sites, like this site, you know, historically in regard to redevelopment of public housing sites, for example, there would generally be a community reference group set up by the state government that the council would be part of, and that there would be an open invitation for community members to be part of. That's something that council has asked for this particular site. The government made no commitment to that up to this point, and indications by Development Victoria are that they don't intend to or plan on setting up a community reference group. So we will make that part of our submission. We'll ask for that again. It is on the record that it is a council position to request that a suitable community reference group is set up. Remains to be seen whether that will actually happen.
Thank you. Follow-on question. We've got this word deliberative engagement, and I'm pretty sure that, and might be other people around the table can help me out here, but I'm pretty sure that the Victorian government is obligated to conduct deliberative engagement in projects sort of like this. Is that the case firstly? And if it is the case, can we add the words as required through, you know, your own deliberative engagement processes?
Through yourself, Chair, we can make reference to the expectations that the government may have set for itself around consultation for these sorts of projects. I don't believe that there's anything that would oblige them to undertake a particular deliberative engagement approach. However, there may well be practices and guidelines that give some indication that they would generally undertake that sort of approach, but I don't believe there's anything that would oblige them to do so.
That seems to have exhausted questions from the floor. I'm now going to be in search of a motion. Councillor Osborne-Smith.
Thank you, Chair.
Just before you do, there's been a suggestion that there's been a couple of undertakings made tonight with regards to the motion, and the officers have asked for a small adjournment to amend the motion, if you wouldn't mind, unless you want to specifically move what's on the screen.
That's what I was going to ask. Thank you.
Terrific, thanks very much. I'm now seeking a motion to adjourn the meeting, postpone the meeting? Adjourn the meeting. Councillor Sinfield.
On that note, I'd like to move an adjournment motion, Chair.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? I do. Councillor Hollingsworth.
So second, thank you.
All in support? It is adjourned. Councillors, would you like to resume your seats? Thanks very much. I'm in search of a motion to resume the meeting. Councillor Hollingsworth.
I propose a motion to resume the meeting, thank you.
You're moving one?
I move a motion to resume the meeting, thank you.
Do I have a seconder? Councillor Rabuki. Thanks very much.
Happy to second.
Thank you. All those in favour? It's carried. We resume the meeting and we will return to you, I presume. Councillor Osborne-Smith, are you still happy to move a motion? There is an amended one on the screen. Are you happy to go with that?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm happy with that.
Do we have a seconder? We do. Councillor Tournay.
Happy to second, Chair.
I understand the CEO would like to address us before we move further. Thank you.
Just very quickly, through you, Chair, item D doesn't read with the preamble.
Do you understand what that means?
Nor does A.
Stora, would you have happier with those words? Terrific. Councillor Osborne-Smith, are you happy with those amended words?
Much happier, thank you.
And Councillor Tournay, are you still happy with those words?
Happy to
as well?
second that, thank you.
Terrific. So, Councillor Osborne-Smith, do you want to address us on that?
No, I think Officer's recommendation now speaks for itself. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thanks very much. I will now put the motion. Councillor Sinfield, are you... I didn't ask, was anyone opposing? I thought everyone was happy.
You didn't. I'm almost happy. Without wanting to draw officers into debate, which is now where I think we find ourselves, I'm just seeking advice as to whether we need to be more specific in relation to the wording of 1A, the tail, and actually describe it as what it's legally known and identified as. I'm uncomfortable with A as it reads. And I would suggest an amendment if I could come up with a form of words that would be appropriate, but I've got nothing top of mind. And I seek officer advice on that.
Mr. Walker, please.
I think the fact that we have referred in our submission when referencing the map and other accompanying discussion, we've clearly referred to the tail, inverted commas, area, that this can and will link clearly with that. So I think the fact that it's been referenced that way in previous submissions within the maps and within the draft submission, that reference here will be acceptable and be able and enable officers to amend the submission to require a shared path and associated open space landscaping to be included around that area.
As a follow-up through you, Chair, I remain uncomfortable about referring to something as it's anecdotally referred, and I don't want to have to vote against it on that basis, and wonder if officers might come up with something more appropriate and if the mover might be willing to make an adjustment.
I'll accept that as a request for a point of clarification, but I would say, in our view, the tail is now in common usage. So I think we're going to go with it the way, unless the mover wants to alter.
If it helps the chair, I might suggest that perhaps after the word tail, you could put in brackets as referred to in the map or other parts of the report. I think that's enough connection to the explanation, if I may suggest.
Surely it has a street address or something.
We could add a reference to that being the southern extension of the site through to Barker's Road.
And beyond.
Portion of the site rather than extension.
Chair, I'd just like to make a comment. It's not just the southern extension that we're seeking, though.
Through you, Chair, if we were to add brackets as depicted on the map and put it, we could easily circle it on the map.
Look, I'm going to rule in this that it's getting far too complicated. Councillor Osborne-Smith, are you happy to stick with the motion as it is on the screen?
I would suggest to support Councillor Sinfield's reasonable request that after the word tail, we put the words bracket, that being the southern extension of the site from Kew to whatever, Auburn Grove, right down to Hawthorn, close brackets. That should be more than satisfactory, I would suggest.
60 Denmark Street to Barker's Road.
Great.
Through yourself, Chair, can I just seek a point of clarification here? The submission that we are making is in regard to the redevelopment of the Vic Road site, which is 60 Denmark Street. That particular site includes a southern extension through to Barker's Road as referenced there. There was commentary from councillors just now about this being about further extensions beyond that site. That's not what the current consultation is about. We have certainly made other submissions and references to the fact that it would link with and enable those further extensions, but that's that reference here that it's about the southern extension through to Barkers Road only is the correct reference.
Okay. Councillor Osborne-Smith, are you now happy with what's on the screen?
Yeah, thank you for that explanation. Yes, I am.
Councillor Tournay, are you
Yes,
happy to
happy
continue
to
to second
second.
that? That's great. I will now put this motion. All those in favour? It is unanimously carried. Thank you, Council. I will now move to general business. Councillors, are there any matters of general business this evening? There are none. Any matters of urgent business? There are none. And confidential business? There are none. Before I close the meeting, I want to thank all who have joined us this evening, and I declare the meeting of the Urban Planning Delegated Committee meeting now closed. Thank you very much.